Today we're gonna make a gluten-free king cake. You're looking at it, I'm enjoying it. If this is your first time making a king cake, even more so gluten-free, you're gonna love this step-by-step video. You're not gonna believe how easy it is. Let's get started. The first thing we're gonna talk about real quick is the gluten-free flour. I have tried this recipe in numerous ways, making my own flour, using an all-purpose gluten-free mix. And if you are an experienced gluten-free baker or somebody that's had celiac disease for a long time, you know that not all mixes are the same. And for this reason, I highly recommend 2 different mixes, and I'm gonna link them right below this video. I've been using specifically this bread mix for years, and it's the one I've developed this super easy technique for you in the video. Why I love it is because you have the flour in the bag and it already comes with the yeast packet, but if you're using the other brand that I listed below, you'll also need yeast. First, get yourself ready by lining your baking sheet with parchment paper because we're gonna make the king cake directly on top of it. Now, king cakes traditionally are filled with this cinnamon sugar in the middle. So we're gonna make that also and have it ready for when we need it by combining brown sugar in a bowl and some cinnamon. Today I'm gonna use a stand mixer to make the dough for the king cake, but if you don't have it, you just use a large bowl and only use a single attachment in your hand mixer to make the dough. The first part is to mix our dry ingredients, which is our bread mix, our yeast, and our sugar. I'm going to simply give this a good mix real quick. To our dry ingredients, we are now going to add our wet ingredients. I'm gonna start by adding my melted butter, eggs, vanilla, milk, and warm water. Now remember, I am gonna have all the ingredient measurements for you right below this video, so you don't have to worry about it. I just want you to learn how to do this technique so your king cake comes out perfect. I'm gonna start on my lowest speed and increase it until I have a dough. You can also stop it from time to time to scrape the sides and bring down the flour so it mixes into it really well, and keep going. So at a first glance, this is not like traditional bread dough at all, so don't worry. It is a little bit wetter and stickier, and that's okay. At the very end, I like to just take the bowl out of the KitchenAid and with a rubber spatula, mix the dough really well because there's still some flour at the bottom. You want to make sure that it's all worked into the dough. Let me give you a really good close-up of what the dough looks like before we transfer it into the bag. I'm gonna fold this over, make a wide opening, transfer like this straight in the bowl. You wanna make sure you get all of it from the sides. And now that I have it in my zip bag, I'm just gonna place it towards the bottom, let the air out, and zip it closed. You can also use a piping bag as well, but I found that a zip bag works. It's really easy, also easy cleanup. And this is gonna help us form our king cake. Now we're gonna form this king cake in 2 steps. I wanna make sure that you don't run out of dough. So for the first circle, you're going to use half of it and then reserve the other half for the top layer. I'm also going to cut about an inch big hole. And then right here, I'm going to form my king cake circle. Now, as you can see, this first base layer is not very fancy. It is going to rise, so don't worry if it looks really thin, but I always wanna make sure that I don't run out of batter because it has happened to me before. I get really happy about piping and then I don't have enough to cover and make the top layer. So on top of this base layer, I'm going to generously cover it with my cinnamon sugar right over the top. You can press it down with your fingers to stretch that base layer of the dough. And if you have some on the sides, don't worry, we're gonna cover that. So the very first part is to press it right onto it. So we have our first base layer done and covered with cinnamon sugar. And now we are going to cover this with the rest of our dough. Now for this top layer, I like to kind of give myself a little zigzag motion just so I can also go afterwards and press it down as well. But you wanna place that dough on top of the other layer. And it is not fancy or pretty looking, but you want to squeeze out every very bit of it and use it up in the areas that you didn't maybe get as much. They're kind of thin. Squeeze it out. So I'm gonna show you how do we shape it and cover this top layer. So you wanna have a bowl of water right next to you because you want to wet your fingertips so they don't stick to the dough. With wet fingertips, you're going to press down on the dough so you can shape it and cover all that cinnamon sugar. And you're gonna do this process all the way around. It's very important that you save half of that dough to make sure you have enough for that top layer. It's better to have a smaller king cake at the bottom and extra for the top. Now, I've been making this recipe since 2010, 11 for my son. We live outside of New Orleans and king cakes are enjoyed. They're very traditional. So gluten-free king cakes did not exist at the time. And moreover, now they're $40, $50 per king cake just because they're gluten-free. So this is a really simple and affordable way to make it at home. So I've covered all of my king cake, and at the very end, if you can also kind of like smooth out the top so you don't see your fingertips, just like that. Now, this king cake is not ready to be baked. It does need to rise. So there are two ways of doing this. One, if your house is warm and your kitchen is warm, and by warm I mean about 74 degrees or more, you can leave it out on the counter for about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Or you can do the overnight method, which is what I always do. That way the king cake is prepped and ready to go for the next day. And that is by placing this king cake straight into the refrigerator and leaving it in there overnight. Unlike traditional bread dough, the gluten-free king cake is not going to double in size. It is, however, going to expand, and you can see it that it's already kind of fluffier in some ways, and that is what you want. This is one step you don't want to skimp on, meaning the proofing of this dough. One last step before I bake it is to brush some milk over the top, and I do this so the bread itself, the top, it doesn't dry out, and it makes a nice surface for us to put our glaze and, of course, our sprinkles. Let's bake this in the oven for about 30 minutes. Okay, so this king cake is ready. Now, before we glaze this king cake, we need to bring it down to cool down completely to room temperature. So let's put it aside and make our glaze. All right, so to make that classic white glaze that's gonna go over our king cake, I have some powdered sugar, I have vanilla, and a little bit of milk. So in the bowl goes. Now you can also use clear vanilla if you don't want the brown coloring. And we're gonna add a little bit of milk as we go. The glaze is gonna be thick, but not a paste. So we're just gonna, little by little, add until we have a nice spreadable glaze. It's gonna feel thick, but don't worry. This is what you want. Two things before you glaze it. One, if you are going to hide a king cake baby, now is the time to do it. And by the way, below this video, I'm gonna have a link to where you can get a king cake baby if you're outside of New Orleans. Also a kit with the traditional colored coarse sugars and everything you need for this recipe. So the first thing I'm gonna do is transfer my king cake out of the baking sheet, just like this, right onto the board or platter that I'm gonna serve it in. We're going to lift it and fold the paper over and then slide it back and put our king cake directly on our board. If you are hiding the baby in the king cake, all you have to do is hide it from under the king cake and push it in to your bread. And there it is. So we're gonna spread the frosting 1 spoonful at a time. The way I do it is by placing it in the middle and letting gravity do its thing. It is thick, but you want to spread it just like that. Glazing a king cake is not a science. It's more like whatever the glaze falls. And towards the end of your glaze, you just fill any empty spots. So now that the glaze is no longer running off, I can take my colored sugars and alternate colors and sprinkle them over the top. So the moment you've been waiting for, let's slice a piece. I'm so excited for this. Delicious. Remember to grab the ingredient measurements and everything you need to make this king cake gluten-free this season right below the video. See you guys next time.